the members of a team all bring ideas to the table, but those ideas aren't very helpful if nobody says anything, right? So the key to creativity in teams is that people talk to each other. And that is not just about people having ideas, it's about being willing to say something to someone else, right? And so the question is, now that we've got our groups together, we're not alone anymore, what are the barriers to people speaking up and giving voice to new ideas?
Right, so one of the most straightforward problems that happen in teams is simply that when you bring people together for a conversation face to face, you can't really talk over each other. You have to wait and take your turn, right? And so this just creates a conversational bottleneck, which introduces all kinds of problems. I mean, for one, I have to sit and sort of wait for you to drone on about your idea, right? And then maybe I forget the idea I had in my head, which actually happens a lot. And so this conversational bottleneck really prevents all of the ideas that people have in their heads from coming out onto the table and being discussed and being the basis for a potential change in perspective. And also, it's not just that people forget and fail to share, but also the conversation moves on, right? And suddenly what you had to say is no longer relevant. And so people figure, well, you know, that ship sailed. And what ends up happening is that through this process, you lose all kinds of interesting ideas that you would have had come to the fore if people were working alone, where they could just write down everything they're thinking, right? And with no constraints.
So if you just gave more time, that wouldn't even solve the problem. I think what you're saying is, even if we took more time so that you could say your piece and I could say my piece and everything, the fact of the matter is, while you're saying your piece, I'm listening, and therefore I'm not generating my own piece, and I've forgotten it by the time it comes back around to me.
Right, so more time isn't an easy fix, but there is some solutions that involve really just giving people the problem beforehand and letting them think and write their own ideas and come to the meeting prepared. And a lot of times people sort of forget to do that simple step, and everyone comes to it, you know, from as it's a new problem, right? And if you give people the opportunity to think in advance, it really helps.
So in effect, de-team, right? So let's reduce teams for a moment. Let us all get our ideas down, and then we'll come back together, and we can circulate them and build and et cetera. But if we're just in a team right here, right now, while I'm talking, you're listening, maybe.
You think? Sorry, what was that?
And there you go. We've lost ideas.
And so people tend to form teams too quickly without doing their homework. So we sort of talked about an optimistic scenario in which everyone's dying to participate and we're like jumping in, right? But you're blocking me because we have so much to say that we can't all speak at once. But that doesn't always happen, right?
No, this is easy. You keep going and I'll just stand here and smile. I love it.
Right, so psychologists call that free riding or social loafing, right?
I'll call it laziness.
Laziness, I love that too. But that often is a consequence of putting people into groups. When you're in a group, you're like, okay, there's 5 or 6 other people. I know they can't really track every single idea I'm saying, and so I can just kind of hide out a little bit, right? And it's like the old saying, many hands make light work. And so in groups, you know, you feel lazy, and that's actually a good thing, right? You feel like I can rely on everyone else. The problem is that you get fewer ideas out on the table. And so there's just less raw material to work with in terms of being creative.
So we produce less because I feel like, well, I did my share.
And so again, there's this theme of creativity requires effort and really thinking through problems and sharing perspectives, and really it's not going to happen just by, you know, the group isn't just going to roll over the next idea, right? And so everyone has to participate, but to the extent that they feel lazy, it just doesn't happen, right?
Well, and there's probably also a social comparison process, right? So so I'm thinking, well, I said 2 things, that guy only said 1, right? So I'm doing fine, right?
So and actually those kinds of comparisons make people happy. At least I'm not that loser, so I can relax because and so when everyone does that, it's like a downward spiral, right?
Right. Yeah.
So,
lowest common denominator. I mean, literally. I mean,
exactly.
that's the logic, right? Is that we're all get a little lazier, and then we compare ourselves to the person who's sleeping.
Right.
Sleeping.
Another gift from Teams, right? But there is actually an easy way around this. So,
I was going to say, what do we do?
Right. So one of the easy ways is just often you have a brainstorming sheet in which people are writing down ideas.
Yeah.
If you simply make each person in the group have their own column, and every time somebody says an idea, you write it in a different column, and it just sends a signal that, oh, my output is being tracked, and I don't want to be the person with no ideas at the end of the discussion, even if no one notices. And I've seen data where just that simple intervention boosts the number of ideas generated by as much as 30%. Wow. So it's just a really simple logistical thing. And it's, we're starting off easy. This is one of the simpler problems to solve.
Right, absolutely. But there are we can go beyond, right? I mean, so some of it is I talk and you're not talking, and this one is, I don't worry about my output because, we're all sort of sharing, and that guy over there is sleeping, so I'm better than him.
Right.
But, these logistics fixes are still things that we stumble over, right? We don't solve these kinds of problems, and then the next one I think is maybe something about timidity, right? Like I don't speak up, right? So even if I have a list with names, maybe I'm not comfortable sharing that. Right?
So. I mean, part of it is that people want their ideas to be liked. We want people to say, like, I love that idea. Right? And the problem is creative ideas sometimes sound weird. They're unusual. They make you look quirky, and, sometimes they generate conflict.
Do I want to put that next to my name?
Exactly right. And so it's awkward. It can be awkward to share ideas. And so what you often find is that rather than sharing their boldest ideas, people share their safest ones, so that people are more likely to say, like, yeah, that sounds reasonable and good. You're okay, right? And so rather than really taking risks and sharing ideas that they think are really path-breaking.
I don't want to look dumb. I don't want to look stupid. I don't want to look irrelevant.
Right.
I don't want to look crazy.
And so these, again, aren't issues when you're working alone, unless you're really neurotic. I'll take that back. But in groups, there really is this very real potential for people to say, like, your ideas are terrible.
Yeah, absolutely.
And people are terrified of that. And so, again, teams make people timid.
Yeah, you're putting yourself out there. So we block each other, right?
Yeah, right.
It's terrible, right? We get lazy, and we get timid. And these are things that, we could fix. We could intervene, but they're going to happen pretty naturally unless you're deliberately intervening.
Right. And in the case of timidity, some groups you'll find actually explicitly rule out criticism. And so there are cases where, like, if you criticize my idea, someone rings a bell, it's like, that's not allowed. That gets around it a little bit, but as we'll see,
pretty artificial.
Right, that there are some more difficult problems to get around.
These are the easy ones.
Right. So we learned that teams have the potential to be creative if only they would voice their, individuals would voice their perspectives. But it turns out there are some problems that arise that some of which are actually pretty simple to address. So things like, I can't talk over you. I have to wait my turn and I can forget ideas. I can also feel lazy in groups because I don't feel like anyone's really tracking me. And I can also get timid because I'm worried that you won't like my ideas. And we offered some sort of preliminary suggestions for how to address those. But it actually gets much more complicated from here. So these were the really easy problems. And from here, we're going to get to some of the more difficult issues that arise in teams.